Have you ever felt like you deserve to be king? Have you ever wanted to be the fairest one in all the land? Have you ever gazed upon the gods and wished you could rule them all? Well, gaze into your mirror, sign that scroll, and call your henchmen as we build a wicked Ember and Amethyst deck around the best, or is it worst, villains in Lorcana for the price of a starter deck. That's right, for around 17 US dollars, we're showing you a deck you can build, master, upgrade, and even bring to your local league to have fun with and compete in matches. Hello Inkspilled Glimmers, I'm your host Nick, and welcome back to Inkling Adventures, the series where we help players take their first journey into the world of Lorcana. Today, we're exploring the world of deck building with a starter budget version of Amber Amethyst. You ready? Let's take a dive. Amber Amethyst is a wicked deck that tries to overpower the opponent by playing big Floodborn villains like Hades, King of Olympus, and Dr. Facilier to flood the opponent in value and take over the game. The strategy is to play these big villains, get a lot of fuel from them, bounce them either through the use of Madame Mim or by sending them into the opponent and getting them back with Dr. Facilier, draw a lot of cards, and eventually use Queen of Hearts and Hades, King of Olympus to win the game outright. Its use of really strong character, a lot of card draw, and a lot of recycling, which is kind of green for a yellow and purple deck, is actually very good. Let's dive into the individual villains that make up this cast of misfits. Our characters in this deck, mostly villains, fall out in usually two categories. Either they serve as card draw engines, or they serve as removal for your opponent's threat. The Queen, Royal Monarch, might be just a 1-drop 2/2, but when on turn 2 you can shift her into the Queen Commanding Presence, who can remove the strength of your opponent and buff your own, she becomes a powerful removal that also quests for 2 every turn. Similarly, Rafiki, who's not a villain, is a 1-drop with Challenger 3, so he can start punching right away and trade with a lot higher cost characters. On the other hand, Magic Broom, Illuminary Keeper, is a character that can come down and be used as card draw later in the game when you play your other characters, or quest if you're on an empty board. On the 2-drop slot, we find Dr. Facilier, Charlatan, another challenger, similar to Rafiki, but that can also be a shift target for our bigger Dr. Facilier, Agent Provocateur, who's used to recycle those cards again and again as they bump into your opponent and remove their threats. Madame Mim Snake is used to just return your cards to your hand and be able to play them later. She doesn't have a lot of early targets outside of just coming out on the board, but later down the line when you have your Maleficent Sorceress or Yzma, Scary Beyond All Reason, you can easily see how having her coming back again and again and triggering the effect can be really useful. Speaking of Yzma, on 2-drops we also have Yzma Alchemist. Yzma Alchemist is a silly little villain that whenever she quests, you look at the top card of your deck, put it on the top or bottom of it. So it's more of card filtering than card draw per se, but she gets you to those good cards a lot faster and eventually allows you to get the big Yzma Scary Beyond All Reason down. In the 3-drop, we have card draw, we have acceleration. So we have Gaston, Despicable Dealer, who is there to just accelerate you. Whenever you exert him, you can pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn. So he allows us to play our big flashy villains a lot faster. On the other hand, Pongo, Determined Father, is pure card draw. You play him, and afterwards, for every turn, you can pay 2, or even the turn he comes down if you're later in the game. Reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character, you put it into your hand. Our deck is 55 characters out of 60, so it's almost a guaranteed hit that he's going to give you that second card every turn. Maleficent Sorceress is a really nice villain that is played still to this day in a lot of competitive deck, that whenever she comes into play, she draws a card. As simple as that. She's a 3-cost Inkable, and when she's done her job, you can play the snake, bring her back, do it all over again, and keep that engine going. Maleficent Vexed Partygoer is more of a high quester kind of scenario. Although whenever she quests, you may choose and discard a card to return chosen character, item, or location with cost 3 or less to their player's hand. That's usually going to be an opponent's card, but it might also be a snake of yours, or a Gaston that you want to protect. Or maybe even our last third drop, the Queen of Art, Wonderland Empress, one of our big finishers of the deck. Whenever she quests, your other villains get +1 lower this turn, which means that at the end of the game, if you have 3, 4, 5 villains on board, you can quest for a massive turn and overthrow. Speaking of massive turns, our pair of Hades, Hades Lord of the Underworld, and Hades King of Olympus, are definitely there for that. Hades Lord of the Underworld allows you to return one of your character cards from your discard to your hand when you play him. But more importantly, Hades King of Olympus quests for 1 more lore for each other villain characters you have in play. So together, they allow you to keep the fuel going, and similarly to Queen of Hearts, have this big, massive turn later down the line, where you will reap everything. Bruni is a small little fire salamander that's not a villain, but he is an evasive 2/2 that can remove a pesky threat that the opponent might have, and whenever he does so, he draws a card. If you have a Dr. Facilia out, he comes back to your hand, and then you repeat the process. The Queen, Wicked and Vain, is a card that we haven't seen a lot in competitive since set 1, but that is still very relevant in lower power formats. She's a 4/5 character for 5 that quests for 1, but that has the ability, exert, draw a card. So, more card draw on a big body. What more can you ask for? We have a few smaller Maleficents in the 3-drop slots, which allows us to play the big Maleficent in the 8-drop slot that shifts for 6. And when you play her, for each of your characters named Maleficent in play, including herself, return a chosen opposing character, item, or location with cost 3 or less to their player's hands. So you're always going to bounce at least one thing as long as they have a target, and maybe more. Wrapping this up, since we're throwing our stuff a lot to the opponent and have a lot of characters, we have 1 copy of Chernabog, Evildoer. He costs 10, but costs 1 less for each character in your discard. And whenever you play him, you shuffle all the characters in your discard back into your deck. Even more recycling. But he's mostly a huge 9/9 body that quests for 3 and will end games on his own. To wrap this up, we have 2 copies of Be Our Guest to find the right characters we need at the right time that can be sung by most of our deck, as well as 3 copies of the Library, a passive lore gain location that also allows us to draw cards whenever one of our characters is banished while there, which is fairly easy when we're the ones rushing into the opponent. If you like the deck and its play pattern, you might want to upgrade it down the line with powerful cards. The first one you might want to look at is Madame Mim Fox. She's a $5.50 Inkable for 3 that does the Madame Mim thing. Whenever you play her, you banish her or return another character to your hand. But she's a 4/3 with Rush, so she's a good removal that will also bring things back to your hand. If you don't want to go that far in terms of budget, you also have the new Madame Mim Elephant from Shimmering Sky, who also does the bounce package. But at the start of your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from her to chosen opposing characters. Given that she's a 3/7, it's really easy to put damage on her and just move it around afterwards. Once you start playing more Madam Mims, you might want to look into Merlin Rabbit, a $3 card that is going to draw you a card every time he comes in and out of play. Really good to get that card draw going, as we were talking about earlier. You might also want to replace Bruni with Elsa, the Fifth Spirit, a $3.29 card that has Rush and Evasive, and that is a 2/5. But also that whenever she comes into play, you exert chosen opposing character, making them easier to challenge with your villain. Finally, if you don't like the whole Facilier route of recycling your characters whenever you play them and crash them into the opponent, you might want to change him for a combo of Ursula Mad Sea Witch, which is a 1/3 with Challenger 2 for 2, which shifts into Ursula Sea Witch Queen, a huge 7-drop, 4/7 that quests for 3, that whenever she quests, you exert chosen character, and that, as long as she's on boards, no other character can exert the Sing Song, which really stops some strategy dead in their track. Finally, you might consider spending $10 to get a Queen's Castle, which is a location with 7 willpower for 4 that quests for 2 every turn, and that at the beginning of your turn, for every character there, you may draw a card. This is one of the most powerful Amethyst draw engines out there, and can really help your game plan. Now, let's jump into the game and see how the deck performs. So, Ember Amethyst. On the play here, inking a snake, playing a Rafiki. Not really the ideal 1-drop when you're on the play. You prefer him on the draw, but still a good threat to assert to that Pluto that he's going to die or be removed if he exerts. But now here we see Madame Mim Fox coming down, taking the Rafiki back to hand, which explains why he was played, after questing for 1. Here, Ursula coming down for the Ember player. We see a Sing be our guest, trying to find even more characters when our Mim Fox is not being threatened. They're not going to send Ursula into Mim Fox. They're definitely not going to send Pluto. And then playing the Queen of Hearts. So already putting our villains down, trying to quest for a lot once we're ready. Here the opponent with Ariel. So that Ariel, once you play a song, can draw and discard. So this is clearly Steel Song we're against, Ember Steel. So in that case, we want to avoid some of their removal. It's not really going to be character-based. It's more going to be song-based or action-based. So here we see some quite aggressive questing because nothing really takes on our board. And that Queen of Hearts already starting to be juicy, presenting an extra lore for all of our villains, which is most of our board. And there, Alan Adele coming and gaining incidental lore from our opponent, who is removing our Rafiki with Daryl and the Storm Rage on. Gladly for us, that's the only non-villain we had on board, so it doesn't really do much. And here, they're preventing our snake from challenging, gaining a lore, and drawing a card. So it's mostly just about cycling the cards in their hand and gaining incidental lore with Alan Adele. Untapping, inking the Queen, playing Gaston, who is going to accelerate us even further into our big villains. But here, really, what we want to do is quest. That first Queen of Heart, making the second Queen of Heart quest for 2, and she's making the Mim Snake quest for 3. This is a really fast clock. Next turn, we have like almost Leo. We have 9 on board from just the characters we have there. Although we probably won't for long, because that Pluto is coming in and is going to remove one of our Queen of Hearts. That Pluto can heal itself at the beginning of their turn, so this is still far from 1. Once again here, our Madame Mim won't be able to attack next turn. They draw a card, win 1 lore, draw this card through the Ariel, and they're going to pass the turn. Alright, so here we can see Dr. Facilier come down, so he's going to allow us to recycle our characters and be a little bit more aggressive if they ever have a threat. Although here, Pluto's been fully healed up. They're starting to have a decent board. And they get Aerial Sonic Warrior, which is really threatening as she's going to start picking up on our characters really, really fast. That's one of the big threats for the deck, that removal that can get in and not necessarily be a challenge-based removal can really make some work. And here we played the Broom, we played a Pongo, banish the Broom to draw an extra card that we ink, and then pay 2 to reveal a Maleficent that comes to our hand as a card draw. So let's see what we're going to do here. Nothing because of that Pluto being a bodyguard. So as you can see, we're still building our boards, even though our Queen of Hearts are no longer there. We're threatening to send our characters in and bring them back to our hand and be able to just shift them again and again. But here the Aerial Sonic Warrior is really being a pain every time they sing a song, being able to do 3 damage to our characters. And since that's not challenge damage, our Dr. Facilier does not return those characters to our hands. So here we're going to play Maleficent, draw a card. Maleficent, draw a card. So as you're seeing, even though this is a budget deck, we're still almost always getting 2 cards or more per turn. And we have a fairly wide board that can be quite aggressive. And also we have the ability to remove that Pluto, return the Pongo to our hand, and, affect their board and make them be on the back foot a little bit. Here, Ariel is going to take off our Dr. Facilier at the cost of 4 damage. They're going to play a second Alenadale, which is going to double their lore production from songs, and Quest with Ursula. Ooh, that's actually a really big threat we drew there with Hades. Let's see if it comes down. Inking Pongo, playing Hades, King of Olympus. That Hades is going to quest for 1 more for each villain we have on the board, which means 1, 2, 3 more. So he's going to quest for 4 next turn if everything gets to live. Although now we have to remove some resources to get that Ariel out of the way after all. And we don't mind crashing into that Ursula because Alenadale has more value to them than the Maleficent's extra questing does for us. But here, they're applying hard pressure through that Alenadale. We're going to have to try to remove them. They have more than lethal on board. So we're going to go ahead and remove everything and try to just stay vigilant. Let's see if it's going to be enough. Oh, World's Greatest Criminal Mind on Hades. That card is not invincible after all. And here Pongo allowing us to draw a little bit more cards. Sending the Queen in. Bouncing the Snake. And here the opponent is just able to quest for 20. Even though we didn't win that one, it still showcased everything the deck's able to do. We had a big turn with the 2 Queen of Hearts. We were able to threaten the board with Hades and threaten the win. And we did that while drawing a ton of cards and having option to quest or remove characters. That's going to be it for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with the card you'd put in the deck if you were the one building it. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, keep on questing.